Hi friends, welcome back to Alice Playworld, bringing you some more Heroes of the Sword content. We're not going to play a game today because my allergies are really bad and I was having a hard time sort of trying to speak while playing the game or any sort of proficiency, but I still wanted to make a video to talk about the latest patch that just came out. I recorded this on Tuesday night, so if you're watching this on Wednesday, of course I'm talking about the patch that came out yesterday. There's a couple things that I wanted to bring up and discuss because I think they're kind of important to the health of the game. Of course, the very first thing you're going to talk about is the fact that a new hero came out, and that is, of course, Cho'Gall. He's arrived to the Nexus. If you haven't heard about that hero, basically it's a character in which two people control one avatar, in a sense. There's two heroes in one, and if you both die, if the character dies, you both die, and you each control sort of a different area. One of them is basically a warrior, and you control the movement and the auto attacks, and the other guy is a caster. That kind of works in reality, even though thematically you're two people in one because of the character. In reality, what you really are is an avatar hat that just permanently fall on the other person. So check him out, read him. I don't actually have him yet because of the fact that all my friends are still playing Fallout, so I don't have anybody to play with. The only way you can get Cho'Gall at the moment is to play a game with somebody who already owns Cho'Gall and finish a little bit of the quest. You can't really buy him with gold, you can't buy him with real money, of course. If you went to BlizzCon or if you got the virtual ticket, you already have that available to you, so you're able to play Cho'Gall immediately. Okay, let's jump here to the sign-in gameplay. Scaling changes. This is the big thing that I wanted to talk about. I'm not gonna go into the actual details or the reasoning behind it, but let's just go ahead and read the main part here. Health and damage scaling for all heroes, battleground events, minions, and mercenaries has been changed from flat additive values to values that are multiplicative by percentage. A large portion of the hero's total scaling amounts, which were previously gained over the course of a game, have been added to their base values. And there is a link there on the blog for you to actually see what they want to say, and of course, Blizzard has some developer comments as to why they're doing what they're doing, but I'll just basically explain it now in case you don't want to go through the trouble of reading all that nonsense. The big problem that Blizzard had was that at lower levels, specifically pre-level 10, so 1 through 9 essentially, level differences were huge. If you were, for example, level 2 and the enemy team became level 4 or level 5, it was virtually impossible for you to do anything to come back from that situation, at least in the early game. That can cause a lot of snowballing because of the fact that the level gap was so huge. Even if you played perfectly, the enemy team would win just because their characters were a lot stronger than you, and that felt cheap. That did not feel great. So oftentimes you saw those situations in which teams could not make plays, they could not dive in and get a pick or try to grab an objective because it's like, listen, this is suicide, let's just soak a lane until it gets better, which could cause a little bit of issues. It can make the game be a little bit boring, and of course you saw this tendency. Although if you did it based on the videos on my channel, you wouldn't, because they're usually really fast. Of games going a little bit longer, you're going for the 30-minute, 25-30 minutes, which is a little bit longer than they intended. So this whole thing caused some concerns at Blizzard HQ. And one of the things that they did, and it's a rather elegant solution if bold, and I go into the reason why in a second, is now those level differences are going to be very almost insignificant. It's going to mirror what happens in the late game. For example, if you are at level 21 and your enemy team is level 23, you're not really scared about engaging. There's a lot more pressure in keeping the map control and maybe getting kills than like, oh, let's go ahead and soak lane. Nobody ever does that because it's not that huge a difference. You can compensate for the lack of level, the lack of your character's strength and health merely by being better. So now that these have been rolled, two big things happen. The heroes are stronger at level 1 than they used to be. If you actually go into the game, you can now eat several shots from the towers and forts, which some people are arguing that's basically not a really good change because of the fact that now it doesn't really feel scary, but you can actually dive in, take 2 or 3 shots from those towers and be fine, which means you can chase fairly effectively. As well, of course, they try to roll and add minion health and mercenaries that you can read there to make it feel very similar to what it was. So as far as clear speed and capping merc camps, it's going to be very similar. It's definitely different. I recommend you playing a couple of games to try it out for yourself. But what that does essentially, it makes it so that heroes that were sort of getting better with age type of thing, heroes that needed a lot of health to be effective, like certain tanks in particular, if we're talking about I don't know, Diablo comes to mind. It's a guy who does really well, but he definitely needs a little bit of padding. Chen is going to benefit greatly from this. Now they're going to be a little bit stronger at level 1, and they're going to be able to do some stuff like, again, eating a couple tower shots, which is going to make the early game a lot more interesting. The second biggest change, and that's basically a standard from the levels 1 through 8, I believe. I have the patch notes here. Yeah, it's around the same value, but that's gonna be really interesting, and that's gonna compound with the second topic that I want to talk about today, which is respawn timers. Respawn timers have been increased for levels 1 through 10. Again, there's another blog. I'll go ahead and link in the description for you guys so you can go ahead and read it in depth. But what this means now is that death timers being significantly increased is going to dramatically change the way you play early game. Right now, there's certain maps, for example, the Haunted Mines, the Infernal Shrines, the Cursed Hollow, although that one not as much because it's just 1 or 2 tributes, where you almost feel like you're getting punished for winning, right? For example, take the Haunted Mines. You'll go into the mines, you'll kill the enemy team, you feel great, you go to kill the golem, they come back full health 2 seconds later and wipe you and get the rest of the skulls. Infernal Shrines is actually, I think, the biggest culprit in this, because you might actually just, you know, kill them and then you don't have enough health to go kill the minions, and then they kill you and then they take the objective, and it sucks. So one of the things that they're trying to do is compensate for this a little bit. So now that you're gonna have stronger heroes, that means you're going to have a little bit more combat in the early game. It also means with increased death timer that those deaths matter a whole lot, and I'll tell you why. Even though you're not getting a brutal amount of XP, it's not like in other MOBAs where you might just get out of control and you're so fat and you might kill people. It does take you out of the fight for a little bit longer. So what does that mean? For example, in teams that have wonky comps like Cho'Gall, means you have one less body in lane. If you kill Cho'Gall, not only are you taking 2 members of the enemy team out of the fight, you're taking essentially 2 people that would be sucking XP out of the fight. So now the enemy team has to rotate and soak the lane that Cho'Gall would have been in. Otherwise, they're in danger of losing 1, maybe 2 waves of experience that they would not be getting otherwise. Or even, you know, if you have somebody like Murky, you might be getting counter pushed, and that's gonna suck. Now you might say out, but of course, now that they made the level of difference less significant, that's not such a big deal. But that's sort of where it sort of is, right? Heroes of the Storm is a game where the entire objective is to sort of pick small advantages and capitalize on them and maintain them through the course of a long period of time. So it's always, I always say it, if you're ahead, the key is to stay ahead. So small advantages, you got a couple picks, you get a little bit more level experience, you have a better positioning to fight for the objective. You have a lead in the objectives, you hold on to it, and then you capitalize and penalize them depending on the map. And then, you know, you grab mercs, that kind of stuff. So small advantages build up over time to the point where you sort of topple the enemy team at the end when you kill the core. So now by having these death timer mechanics, you're basically, it's going to allow you to, in the early game, do some interesting stuff. I think that's also going to shake the meta a little bit. Heroes like the Lost Vikings might see a lot of permanence now, depending on how well they scale. Because again, think about that. If you have an enemy team that has Cho'Gall, right? They have 1 less body in the field. You kill Cho'Gall. That's a negative 2 people in a 3-lane map. Their people are going to have to spread out. And then you have an objective spawning, like for example in the Cursed Hollow, you got to go for a tribute. You can afford now, for at least a couple seconds, a couple waves of experience, which will add up over time, to keep 1 Viking in each lane and have the rest 4 members of the friendly team go for the tribute. You'll likely get it and not lose any experience, forcing the enemy team to do some interesting choices at that point. Do you rotate for experience? Do you try to stall the tribute? Do you skip the tribute altogether and counter push? So I think this is going to add a lot of dynamic decision making, particularly higher levels of gameplay. I think the biggest issue you're gonna see if you're in the lower leagues, and by that I mean if you're, you know, gold and below, which is nothing wrong with that. I mean, I'm not judging, but if you're sort of in that MMR bracket, if you're wondering what I'm referring to, is mostly using hot selects, where we still don't have any sort of interesting ranking. I don't like using the Hero League ranks because that really don't mean much. The difference between a level 1 and a rank 1 and a rank 1 that's 3k MMR is huge. So I can't really use that, but for comparison, if you're in a lower, let's say, skilled bracket of gameplay, and you might see this because I know some of you guys who think that you're in MMR hell because your teammates keep dying all the time. That's gonna get worse. That's gonna get really bad because now you're gonna have characters or players who are gonna die and then be out of the fight for some time and they come back and die again, and now you're gonna be playing 4v5 for an extended period of time. Hopefully, the idea being that those people will quickly learn, because one of the best ways to learn something is to not like the consequences. And if you're not playing the game, hopefully that will be a better incentive, because now there is actually a little bit of heft to actually, you know, dying. So that's going to be at the beginning. I urge caution and patience because that will go away eventually. But what I think will happen at the end of all this is we're going to have a lot more interesting early game. and maybe even shorter games. And that takes me to the next point of discussion, which is the meta game. I think is going to shift significantly, because now right now in the meta, we're sort of going for this pretty stereotypical thing, even though, you know, if you watch the BlizzCon tournament, even the qualifiers, there's a really good choice. There's a broad choice in heroes. There was a lot of people that picked heroes that were not necessarily what you would call tier 1 or tier 2, and they're viable at that point. But now, with this new scaling changes, that's going to throw a little bit of a wrench in there, and the balance might have to be redone. We don't know how this is going to play out. Even though they're trying numerically to go as close to what it was as possible, obviously when you're rolling in the base stats, you're going to run into some issues, right? Because you're not doing a linear progression for every hero. You're not balancing every hero per level. You're sort of just balancing the stats the way they're incrementing. And now you're going to have maybe strategies for a couple weeks that are going to be based on winning the game in the first 10 minutes, right? You're going to pick heroes that scale really well, and you put a lot of pressure, get a couple kills, and just snowball, get a keep early on, put your enemy team in the back foot, and finish it as quickly as possible. That's going to cause a whole bunch of mayhem, and it's going to shift the meta really quickly. It doesn't help that we have Cho'Gall either. I did play a couple games just to see what it was like. I didn't play with Cho'Gall, but I played a couple games in Quick Match. You find him all over the place. He feels very powerful at the moment, and I think, I'm not going to say he's overpowered because I've played 2 games against him, but one of the things that it's hard not to crack is the fact that Cho is a strong, sturdy warrior, and Gall is a caster, and they share a health bar, so you got to get in there, right? And they can do an absurd amount of damage, and they have quite a little bit of sustainability. They can stay in lane for a minute. When you add a hero like that in this new sort of balance changes, it's gonna feel really terrible at the beginning, because I feel like Cho'Gall is a hero that scales really well with this nonsense. Obviously, I'm talking about both of the heroes combined. So it's gonna be very interesting to see what that does to the meta. I am a little afraid that they did that because of the previous point that I made, which is the balance. I feel like Blizzard had done really well at keeping the game relatively balanced. Of course, there were a lot of issues that people would complain about, even still to this day. But if you look at it in the broad scheme of things, how many heroes were viable, right? Even if you can't play Stitches in Ranked, or at least you shouldn't, there was a lot of stuff there that you could, and now that might go out the window with this new change. And I think it's going to be imperative, if there are changes that need to happen, if there are people that need to get tuned up or tuned down, that Blizzard accelerate the rate of patching at the very least in the short term, because they usually wait 2 to 3 weeks. These balance patches take a while to come out, and I get it, you want to go for numbers, but right at this moment we're going through a really crucial stage in the game's lifetime, which is a lot of other games are coming out. You know, a lot of people are playing Fallout, a lot of people are excited about Overwatch, a lot of streamers that were sort of into this game have also split their attention that way. And you want this game to survive its infancy. You want to create an environment in which people are playing this game for years to come, right? That's the whole point of a MOBA. Like, League of Legends has terrible graphics that are extremely outdated, but people still love it. Excuse me. There's an incredible amount of viewership all over the world, and the game is super popular. That is because of the actual gameplay examined and the culture, the community around it. And I think that if you alienate, Blizzard has had an issue with alienating certain fans in this particular game for a while. And even though it didn't become quite as popular as they thought this game was going to become, or it didn't grow quite as fast as a lot of people thought, on top of that, a lot of people have been, frustrated with the matchmaking, and it's taken a long time, and they're sort of trying to roll it out. And you can definitely tell that it's because the studio, this is not a priority title for the studio. But if you lose too many players, you're going to get below that critical mass, and that's going to be the end of the game. So I think it's a really bold move by Blizzard. I think it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with the meta game and what choices become viable, what people try. You might see a lot more gas, a lot more other stuff that I think will be really cool to see. I'm terrified of Zagara, actually, although not. We'll see. That's another thing that I'm interested in seeing. How does the Hunter Killer fare now that the heroes are stronger? Does he scale up, or is it now bearable? Can you eat a Hunter Killer and stay in lane with her? That'll be interesting stuff to see how that evolves and what that means for the game at large. Those are the main two topics that I wanted to talk about. Another big change that I think is worth mentioning, it's not really a big change, it's the fact that the interface got changed slightly. So now, the in-game score screen takedowns has been removed, and now it has two columns. You have kills and assists, and of course deaths. And the idea is very similar to what you had before. Instead of takedowns, which were if you're part of a kill, you got a takedown. Now, if you assist in killing somebody, if you're part of the kill, you get an assist. But if you get the killing blow, you get a kill. And the reasoning behind this, according to Blizzard, is that they wanted to have a way to track an assassin's contribution to the game. I, among many people in the community, think this is a very silly idea. I am not quite as opposed to it. I mean, I think it's you shouldn't be at it. There's no need for it. It's irrelevant as a statistic. But a lot of people are angry because they think that this is going to encourage a lot of toxicity in the game, particularly in quick match, particularly in ranked games when you're not playing together, so Hero League instead of Team League. And the reasoning is very simple. There is no need to keep track of last hits in this particular game, right? If you talk about a game like League of Legends, when you last hit, you get gold. And with gold, you buy items. And with items, you get stronger, particularly on top of that, clearly the fact that you also level up differently. So those last hits are significant because if you kill somebody, you're getting that XP, you're becoming stronger, and you get to carry your team. That's why somebody will get really cross with you if you're playing a support character in League of Legends and you never know what you're doing, and you jump in and you see a guy low in health, you're like, whoa, this is a team game, we're fighting together, I'm gonna kill him. So you hit him, and then you get yelled at for like 5 minutes straight because the other dude was like, hey man, you stole my kill. And that makes sense in that game. There's a big deal. And Heroes of the Storm, hero kill XP is global. So if your enemy team is really bad and the dude walks up to the tower and gets shot 1,000 times and just dies, you still get that experience. There is no need whatsoever to keep track of that stat. What does it do? It creates competition by tracking that stat between a certain subset of people. If you play with organized play, I think most people are going to be mature enough to say that stat doesn't really matter. But if you play in a pickup game, it's going to create competition within friendly players. So that's one of the concerns, that maybe you'll see a lot of toxicity because you'll be like, man, you're playing Nova and you only have 5 kills. So even though you've maybe been doing great and maybe you've been getting everybody to 1% health and a minion shoots them or someone else kills them or whatever the case might be, you're not going to be seen as contributing because you're supposed to be getting high numbers of that kills. The other problem there, of course, being is hitting somebody last is really not what you want to do. You want to encourage to get quick kills in a team fight because then you're going to have that hero not contributing to damage on your side, not contributing healing to the enemy team, and that gives you an advantage. If you have people saving their cooldowns to get that last hit, you might not be as effective in a team fight and you might get wiped. So it's really encourages the type of gameplay that does not fit in the game. So a lot of players are concerned about that. There was a lot of backlash in the community, a lot of feedback saying don't do it, it's stupid for A, B reasons, for the reasons I mentioned and so many others. But Blizzard went ahead and did it anyway, so we'll see. I don't really understand their rationale behind it. I think a more elegant way to do it might have been to either leave it as it was, the takedowns, the deaths, your siege damage, your hero damage, and then maybe put it in the roll column. So for an assassin, maybe put killing blows. Or what I think would be more interesting for an assassin would be damage per life. I think that would be a really cool way to take it, because I've seen a lot of assassins who are like, oh man, I have 70,000 hero damage. I'm like, but you died 11 times and you did the division, you didn't do that much damage every time you were alive. Particularly now that the deaths matter a lot more in the early game. I think that'd be fascinating. Or, there's also a lot of assassins that build really funky builds. I've seen some Novas that love to do that, and Jaina as well. Well, they'll have really high damage numbers, but they never kill anybody because they unleash their entire combo on a tank. He gets to 25% health and he walks away. That's not as useful, right? Although arguably, neither is just counting last hits, because again, maybe a guy walks into a tower, just gets a bunch of damage, and you go in and you tap him one time, and then you get the credit. It doesn't seem like a thing that should be worried about, particularly in what it's already a little bit convoluted and bloated score screen. So that's one more of the games. We'll see how that goes. I don't think that's a big deal. The last change I will talk about this particular map is the replay compatibility with future patches. And this is something I'm really excited about finally. Starting with today's patch, replay files created in the current version of Heroes of the Storm or later will remain viewable after patches are released. This is excellent news for me, because one of the things that I've been wanting to do, and have done a couple in the channel, is cast pro games. The problem with the pro games is that they come out in packs. Somebody will release, Rocket will release 10 of their replays, or the ESL will release an entire round of a tournament in one sitting, and then I have a job, so I can't do this whole day, and I'll put it off for a couple days, and then guess what? Surprise hotfix or surprise patch to change one tiny thing. You can no longer view that replay, you cannot cast it. So that's going to be really good for myself and for lovers of esports. Also, it will allow you to sort of actually use the replays what they're meant to do, to be able to analyze your play, and you can do some creative stuff like before and after patch changes and that kind of stuff. So that's a really cool change, and I believe that's the last little bit that I want to talk about. Let me just really quickly go over the notes here. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. They're removing the Haunted Mines from the rotation for the moment being, because they go into Tail Battlegrounds and they think that's a little bit hectic if you keep going on bigger and bigger lists. I think that'll be interesting to see how they fix it. I think in the future it makes sense to sort of have like you have a weekly for hero, you have a weekly battleground setup that you can play, and that should be, at least for quick match, maybe for ranked, you'll do a way of StarCraft and keep a pool of what the most competitive maps are, and that should be interesting. But anyway, I would love to hear you guys' thoughts and opinions on the aforementioned stuff, and particularly, I mean, the silly stuff like the score screen. I would love to see what you think. I don't know if it matters to some of you. I'm sure some of you are like, whatever, I don't really care about it. Some of you are like, oh, that's unnecessary. I would love to know what you think about that one, and of course, what the early game feedback might be, especially over the next couple weeks. I think, obviously, right now, the patch just came out. It's going to take us a while to get used to it. But let me know on Twitter. I'm at aKingOfCats what your experience has been, because I'm really interested to know what the experience is across a range of skill levels and a range of heroes. You know, I play, for the most part, if I'm playing ranked, you usually play assassin support. Very, very rarely do I play tank. So I have a very narrow sort of, you know, idea what I do. Of course, I'll play tank if we need to, but for the most part, I'm either an assassin or support, because that's just the most effective thing to do. So I think these changes are going to be really interesting to see how they're perceived in the early game from all kinds of, you know, walks of life. And of course, remember to always go to the forum and give them a proper feedback if you're having some troubles or some issues with anything sort of like, again, balance issues, which are bound to arise because of the new patch. Anyway, my name is Al. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little longer than anticipated, but it was an interesting discussion, and I promise you, if I feel better tomorrow, depending on my allergies are killing me, hopefully we can get some gameplay, and then maybe I'll get somebody to carry me so we can get Cho'Gall, and that'd be exciting. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.